Hello and welcome to this exploring session, the first session on The Jew of Malta by Christopher Marlowe, the famous tragedy of the rich Jew of Malta as it was played before, etc., 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 as printed in 1630 off the top of my head. It, however, was first produced somewhere in the region of 1589-ish. It goes through a number of companies and a number of actors over its initial few years. Quite popular play. We do have a lot of data on its performance history across nations. It is important at this point to throw in important trigger warnings. This is basically quite an anti-Semitic play. It's quite an anti-Semitic week, to be honest. We are covering many problematic plays this week with various issues from the early modern world. We usually take it as read that we're going to trip over something a little unpleasant in the woodshed with many early modern plays, but here we kind of have to face that off and just say it's here and it's part of the text. So that is in place there. And we will probably be discussing this at length as we go through this over 3 sessions. We're looking at Act 1 and we're going to career into Act 2 in this session today with this wonderful room of readers who are going to be discussing, throwing in some first thoughts, but also to a degree throwing in some pre-processed thoughts, because this play has a fairly good modern production history and it's very difficult to be surprised by it. But you never know, we may succeed. So today, reading, depending on how you want to go for it, some say Barabbas, but perhaps more properly Bar-Abbas, is going to be read by...
Hi, Lois Potter, retired academic living in London.
Reading today, Machiavel or Mac-Evil, Abigail and Martin.
I'm Alexandra, and having read this play, I for once am not entirely clueless.
I like so Martin Del Bosco. I should do his full name, but I just like calling him Martin. It's a nice leveler. Reading Farnese and Lodovic today is...
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Amisu and I'm an author living in Romford.
Reading Jew number 2 and Calimath today is...
Hello, I'm Helen Good. I'm a historian. I'm in Yorkshire and I have seen this play, but I can't remember a thing about it.
New to the group, reading Jew number 1, Basso number 1, and Abbess is...
Hi, I'm Sheila Corsi. I live and work in St. Louis, Missouri, and I managed to read this play long ago and forgotten most of it at this point, so I am both an old and new reader.
Reading Merchant number 1, Knight number 1, and Friar Barnardine is...
Hi, I'm Alan Scott. I'm neither an actor nor an academic, and I've never read this play.
Reading new to the group as well, Jew number 3, Officer number 1, and Friar Giacomo is...
Hello, my name is Andrew Alton-Reid. I'm from Chelmsford in Essex, and I'm very much looking forward to going through this play.
Yes, the Essex energy is strong with us today. Reading Merchant number 2, Knight number 2, Matthias, and Officer number 2 is...
Hello, I'm Eric, and well, I've never read this play, but ironically I was just listening to This Jesus Must Die right before it, so I mean, you know, that put me in the mood, I guess.
And I am your host, Robert Crighton. I will be reading stage directions and filling in where I've gone horribly, horribly wrong with any doubling. Luckily, this is a play that actually doubles incredibly well, so hopefully that should be fine. Just a note, in terms of talking about acts and scene divisions, I am utilising one interpretation of such from a Penguin edition, but the original printing has no scene or act. It may have act divisions. I can't remember off the top of my head. So your text may vary, but I doubt it will. Just throwing that out there for those who like to read along. Without further ado, we are going to skip in the latter day of this play's life. Thomas Hayward wrote some additional prologue and epilogue material. Prologues and epilogues tending to be quite detachable things, depending on the occasion. If you want to hear the prologues to The Jew of Malta, they are available on the podcast, and you can listen to those now. The epilogues are coming in the future. But we're going to nip back in time to an approximation of 1589-ish, and we're going to go with the opening that we have, as we have on stage Machiavel or Mac-Evil, depending on your decision on pronunciation.
Albeit the world think Machiavel is dead, yet was his soul but flown beyond the Alps, and now the geezer's dead, is come from France to view this land, and frolic with his friends. To some, perhaps, my name is odious, but such as love me, guard me from their tongues, and let them know that I am Machiavel, and weigh not men, and therefore not men's words. Admired I am of those that hate me most. Though some speak openly against my books, yet they will read me, and thereby attain to Peter's chair, and when they cast me off, are poisoned by my climbing followers. I count religion but a childish toy, and hold there is no sin but ignorance. Birds of the air will tell of murders past. I am ashamed to hear such fooleries. Many will talk of title to a crown. What right had Caesar to the empery? Might first made kings, and laws were then most sure when, like the Dracos, they were writ in blood. Hence comes it that a strong-built citadel commands much more than letters can import, which maxim, had Phalaris observed, he'd never bellowed in a brazen bull of great one's envy. Oh, the poor petty wights, let me be envied, and not pitied. But whither am I bound? I come not I to read a lecture here in Britain, but to present the tragedy of a Jew, who smiles to see how full his bags are crammed, which money was not got without my means. I crave but this, grace him as he deserves, and let him not be entertained the worse because he favours me.
And exit. And we'll just briefly pause there. Nice topical reference there. Guise has just died. So that's probably what, the year before, somewhere around there. He'll be figuring in Marlowe's Massacre at Paris in a few years' time. Always nice to get a name check there. So Machiavel. The real chap is obviously there on stage, literally there on stage, popular. Any thoughts in the room at this opening? How did that go for everyone? Who wants to leap in first on so little data? Alexandra.
Just a question. Do we have any idea why?
Because.
Machiavel turns... Yes, go ahead.
I said because.
Right. No, I get that it's establishing the mood, but I did find it strange that he's using an established historical figure to kind of make a point about deviousness shall follow, and then never mention them again.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely. I think that basically is it. Yes, it's a shorthand, and I don't know how in vogue Machiavelli is at this precise second in time. Lois, I see a hand.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of talk about Machiavelli. I mean, loads of plays that mention him. There's a character in one of Robert Greene's plays who apparently is making annotations upon Machiavel. So, I mean, he more or less stands for evil. Most people hadn't read him. I mean, they just talk about him. They may have read attacks on him. I love this prologue myself, and I think it's meant to kind of get at everybody. I mean, most of the people he mentions are not Jews. In fact, they're Christians, and he does also say that he hasn't come there to read a lecture in Britain, which sort of implies he doesn't need to. They all know about him anyway.
Mm. Yes, any other thoughts? Was that away from Sheila, or you just scratching your face? Eric.
Well, it's kind of like they're painting him as this sort of very... I mean, obviously Machiavelli was associated with sort of evil, blah, 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 as we've said. but he's very painted almost like the devil, kind of like, and let him not be entertained the worse because he favors me. And it's like, I think it's maybe the way that Alexander read it as well. It's like there is a very, a plot afoot, and we will, explore it soon.
Yes, it's just so passé to have Satan himself turn up, isn't it? You've got to have someone's factors. Lois.
Yeah, there's another thing actually. Because he favors me, that could both mean because he's on my side and because he looks like me. I mean, he couldn't possibly, I think, be doubling Barabbas. In one production I saw, he did actually double Farnese, which made a whole point, which becomes clear only really at the end of the play.
Excellent. Helen?
For no reason at all, I'd just like to point out that there was actually a family of Italians living in London at more or less this time who were actually called Machiavelli. I know because they gave witness statements in Star Chamber. And I thought it very odd at the time. They don't seem to have been particularly wicked.
Yes, would there be pressure for them to change their name because of, just that associative thing? Because we do have that in history, of people changing their names when they have an unfortunate association.
Yes, I'm not sure whether they were permanently in London. I mean, there must have been loads of people with unfortunate names. I mean, I actually know a bloke called Peter Sutcliffe, poor fellow.
Yes, I have written a whole piece on that once about people with unfortunate names. It happens a lot more than you'd think, and anyway, we're going on a tangent. Alan.
Yeah, the one thing is, I don't see Machiavelli as being an evil character. I mean, I had to study some of his works many years ago as part of my degree on political ideas, and he was a political realist and a political operator. These days he'd be a spad. So not necessarily evil.
Oh, come.
So for the opinion of the time was that he was pretty evil. I mean,
they
that's
didn't
the
know
important
that.
thing is we can assess Machiavelli's works, but in terms of repute, that he's a wrong un, as far as anyone is concerned. Anyway, and even today, I don't think he's got a desperately great rep. He may have a slightly more balanced rep, but he's, Anyway, we will move on to Act 1, Scene 1. We have the stage direction. Barabbas discovered in his counting house with heaps of gold before him. A not problematic opening statement at all there from the stage directions.
So that of thus much, that return was made. And of the third part of the Persian ships, there was the venture summed and satisfied. As for those Samnites and the men of Uz that bought my Spanish oils and wines of Greece, here have I pursed their paltry silver lings. Fie, what a trouble 'tis to count this trash. Well fare the Arabians, who so richly pay the things they traffic for with wedge of gold, whereof a man may easily in a day tell that which may maintain him all his life. The needy groom that never fingered groat would make a miracle of this much coin. But he whose steel-barred coffers are crammed full, and all his lifetime hath been tired, wearing his fingers' ends with telling it, would in his age be loath to labor so, and for a pound to sweat himself to death. Give me the merchants of the Indian mines that trade in metal of the purest mold. The wealthy Moor that in the eastern rocks without control can pick his riches up, and in his house heap pearl like pebble stones, receive them free and sell them by the weight. Bags of fiery opals, sapphires, amethysts, jacinths, hard topaz, grass green emeralds, beauteous rubies, sparkling diamonds, and seld-seen costly stones of so great price as one of them, indifferently rated, may serve in peril of calamity to ransom great kings from captivity. This is the ware wherein consists my wealth, and thus methinks should men of judgment frame their means of traffic from the vulgar trade. And as their wealth increaseth, so enclose infinite riches in a little room. But now, how stands the wind? Into what corner peers my halcyon's bill? Ah, to the east, yes. See how stand the vanes, east and by south. Why then, I hope my ships I sent for Egypt and the bordering isles are gotten up by Nilus' winding banks. Mine argosy from Alexandria, loaden with spice and silks now under sail, are smoothly gliding down by Candy shore to Malta through our Mediterranean sea. But who comes here?
And enter a merchant. Merchant number 1, please.
How now?
Barabbas, thy ships are safe, riding in Malta road, and all the merchants with other merchandise are safe arrived, and have sent me to know whether yourself will come and custom them.
The ships are safe, thou sayest, and richly fraught?
They are.
Why, then go bid them come ashore, and bring with them their bills of entry. I hope our credit in the custom house will serve as well as I were present there. Go, send them 3 store camels, 30 mules, and 20 wagons to bring up the ware. But art thou master in a ship of mine, and is thy credit not enough for that?
The very custom barely comes to more than many merchants of the town are worth, and therefore far exceeds my credit, sir.
Oh, go tell them the Jew of Malta sent thee, man. Tosh, who amongst them knows not Barabbas?
I go.
So then there's somewhat come. Sarah, which of my ships art thou master of?
Of the Speranza, sir.
And saw'st thou not mine argosy at Alexandria? Thou couldst not come from Egypt or by Cairo, but at the entry there into the sea where Nilus pays his tribute to the main. Thou needs must sail by Alexandria.
I neither saw them nor inquired of them. But this we heard some of our seamen say. They wondered how you durst, with so much wealth, trust such a crazed vessel, and so far.
Tush, they are wise. I know her and her strength. But go thou thy ways, discharge thy ship, and bid my factor bring his loading in.
And exit that first merchant.
Yet I wonder at this argosy.
Enter a second merchant.
Thine argosy from Alexandria, no, Barabbas, doth ride in Malta road, laden with riches and exceeding store of Persian silks, of gold and orient pearl.
How chance you came not with those other ships that sailed by Egypt?
Sir, we saw them not.
Belike they coasted round by Candy shore about their oils or other businesses. But 'twas ill done of you to come so far without the aid or conduct of their ships.
Sir, we were wafted by a Spanish fleet that never left us till within a league, that had the galleys of the Turk in chase.
Oh, they were going up to Sicily. Well, go and bid the merchants and my men dispatch, and come ashore and see the fraught discharged.
I go.
And indeed, exit second merchant.
Thus trolls our fortune in by land and sea, and thus are we on every side enriched. These are the blessings promised to the Jews, and herein was old Abraham's happiness. What more may heaven do for earthly man than thus to pour out plenty in their laps, ripping the bowels of the earth for them, making the sea their servants, and the winds to drive their substance with successful blasts? Who hateth me but for my happiness? Who is honored now but for his wealth? Rather had I, a Jew, be hated thus than pitied in a Christian poverty. For I can see no fruits in all their faith, but malice, falsehood, and excessive pride, which methinks fits not their profession. Haply some hapless man hath conscience, and for his conscience lives in beggary. They say we are a scattered nation. I cannot tell, but we have scambled up more wealth by far than those that brag of faith. There's Kiriajirim, the great Jew of Greece, Obed and Bierseth, nuns in Portugal, myself in Malta, some in Italy, many in France, and wealthy every one, Aye, wealthier far than any Christian. I must confess we come not to be kings. That's not our fault. Alas, our numbers few, and crowns come either by succession or urged by force. And nothing violent, oft have I heard tell, can be permanent. Give us a peaceful rule. Make Christians kings that thirst so much for principality. I have no charge nor many children, but one sole daughter, whom I hold as dear as Agamemnon did his Iphigene, and all I have is hers. But who comes here?
And enter 3 Jews.
Hush, tell not me. 'Twas done of policy.
Come, therefore, let us go to Barabbas, for he can counsel best in these affairs. And here he comes.
Why, how now, countrymen? Why flock you thus to me in multitudes? What accidents betided to the Jews?
A fleet of warlike galleys, Barabbas, are come from Turkey and lie in our road, and they this day sit in the council house to entertain them and their embassy.
Why, let 'em come, so they come not to war. Or let 'em war, so we be conquerors. Nay, let 'em conquer and kill all, so they spare me, my daughter, and my wealth.
Were it for confirmation of a league, they would not come in warlike manner thus.
I fear their coming will afflict us all.
Fond men, what dream you of their multitudes? What need they treat of peace that are in league? The Turks and those of Malta are in league. Tut, tut, there is some other matter in't.
Why, Barabbas, they come for peace or war.
Haply for neither, but to pass along towards Venice by the Adriatic Sea, with whom they have attempted many times, but never could effect their stratagem.
And very wisely said, it may be so.
But there's a meeting at the Senate House, and all the Jews of Malta must be there.
Ah, all the Jews in Malta must be there. Why, like enough. Why then, let every man provide him and be there, for fashion's sake. If anything shall there concern our state, assure yourselves I'll look unto myself.
I know you will. Well, brethren, let us go.
Let's take our leaves. Farewell, good Barabbas.
Farewell, Ziareth. Farewell, Tamayanti.
And exit the Jews.
And Barabbas, now search this secret out. Summon thy senses, call thy wits together. These silly men mistake the matter clean. Long to the Turk did Malta contribute, which tribute, all in policy, I fear, the Turk has let increase to such a sum as all the wealth of Malta cannot pay. And now by that advantage thinks belike to seize upon the town. Aye, that he seeks. Howe'er the world go, I'll make sure for one, and seek in time to intercept the worst, warily guarding that which I have got. Ego mihi met sum semper proximus. Why, let him enter, let him take the town.
And exits. And that's the end of the first scene. We will possibly be noticing a pattern here of Barabbas saying an awful lot, and then some other people come on and say, do some feed lines, and or do some exposition. I think structurally it might be something that we get quite a lot of in terms of balancing of material. Yeah, it's interesting to note these sort of what's going on with the merchants as they come in and deliver news, and his waiting for news. Just I think before I try and do any break down my thoughts, any thoughts in the room? Anyone want to leap in with your impressions of the play so far? Eric.
I was amused by the sort of dig at the whole. Well, maybe it's a dig. I don't know. Where in the first long speech by Barabbas or Barabbas, depending on how you pronounce it, he goes, "Oh yeah, and it's you can have all these pearls and gems to ransom great kings out of captivity," and it's like, is that about Richard? Or it's like not subtle at all.
I wonder if there is a contemporary reference there, rather than saying going back that far. We could argue very tenuously that this is a history play. This does vaguely dance around events in the non so distant past, even if the plot itself has nothing to do with actual real life. So yeah, interesting thought there, Helen.
The most recent one I can think of was 1525. Francis I was captured at the Battle of Pavia. Francis I of France was captured at the Battle of Pavia, and his ransom pretty well broke France.
Mm. Yes, we've had this this few times. There's I just want to everyone in the room just note that thing about the fiery opals, sapphires, amethysts, etc. Just lodge that in your memory. We may come back to that another time. Other thoughts, Sheila.
Yeah, from a performance question, those of you who have seen this perhaps several times in performance, that scene with Barabbas and the three Jews, how has it been performed? Have you seen versions performed where those asides are more or less permeable? So like when he says, assure yourselves I'll look unto myself, and the first Jew says, I know you will, is it sometimes performed where they seem kind of aware of his untrustworthiness or his mutability, or is that usually performed as a totally Machiavellian aside?
I don't think I ever have seen it performed with any suggestion that they were seeing through him. You know, probably because there's not much anywhere you can go with that either, since
Right.
they don't come back to him in any way about it.
There is a good question about asides generally in the play. I mean, some of them are marked and seem to be moderately authentic, but there might be a lot more, and some of them might be overplayed. And there's an awful lot of people talking to specific people as well within scenes. So there's an awful lot of that to negotiate, and I think that's a really important thing to go with. Helen.
Nice to be back with some unrhymed blank verse. It's a bit like coming home. I do notice that he isn't ending scenes or signifying major entrances or exits with couplets. So he isn't, I mean, he may go on to do that later, but he isn't doing it so far. And I have a strong feeling that if the relationship between Agamemnon and Iphigenia did not end well.
No. Generally speaking, that's not one of the more cheerful myths.
No, I mean, I hold her as dear as Agamemnon did Iphigenia. Does not mean what it appears to mean.
Yeah.
It means I would be very happy to cut her throat if it advantaged me.
Well, Agamemnon did love Iphigenia, but he did also sacrifice her in order to get favorable winds. I mean, it's perfectly true that he loved her. But yes, in the production, I think it was in the 1990s in Stratford. I think it was it Alan Armstrong? Actually looked out of the audience to see if anybody got it, and then, well.
Yeah.
And of course, we've got to be slightly wary about precisely, how worked this material is over time. This is a text coming from a later revival. Yeah. That's when the printing's happening. So you never know. The original might have been more solid in that way. We've got 40 odd years of performance behind it, and room for revising. So we can never be 100% certain on that. Alexandra.
I was just sort of confustigated at the whole Jew of Malta. I am the Jew of Malta. There is the title of the Jew of Malta. Anyway, my three also Jewish friends who are also Maltese. Let's have this conversation. Oh, about all the Jews in Malta. Right. Okay, fine. And then I think later on he either refers to himself as the Jew of Malta again, or he gets referred to as that. So that was confusing. I don't know if that's something that we would consider an oversight in the text, or if that's something that's there would have been a difference in the meanings that I nowadays as audience didn't grasp.
I too circled ding ding title of the show moment because it's always nice to do that. I think the second time he talks about all the Jews in Malta, which is sort of reiterating the plot point of, there's going to be a big gathering with something's happening.
Yeah, I mean, he refers to himself as the Jew of Malta. He refers to the Jew of Greece, and then says there's a couple of people in a few other places. And what he's referring to at that specific point is people who are enormously rich. So he could be going, I'm the one who's doing best here, and then there's one guy who's doing the really good work in Greece, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. It might be that, but I don't know how we'd convey that to an audience nowadays, not to get the same reaction that I had and that I think a lot of people would have, where you go, okay, so there's only you. No, there's 3 more people. No, there's an entire population, and there's only you. What?
Well, I suppose you could try putting inverted commas around it. I mean, he sees himself as the Jew of Malta. That's how people refer to him. The great Jew of Malta. Actually, they referred to the head of the Turkish Empire as the Great Turk. I mean, probably because they just couldn't bother to learn his name. I mean, that could be one reason.
Okay, other questions, Eric, or thoughts?
Well, it's not so much a question. It's more like, okay, I guess it is a question because I'm not up to speed with my Bible reading. But wasn't Barabbas one of the it's sort of either a thief or sort of forgiven for something, or I don't know what the reference is there.
Well, we will come round to him shortly, but I think Alexandra would like to leap in on that point for us.
Yes, the answer is Barabbas is the name of the person who gets released, as opposed to it being Jesus that gets released by Pilate for some fictitious holiday reasons. And
no, because it's Passover.
Oh, right. No, sorry. Yes.
Not fictitious at all.
Yeah. The other thing is it means son of the father in Hebrew. So it's a very generic kind of name.
Yes. So, for example, you might call Jesus Bar Joseph. Would be a way of talking about Jesus and things like that. So it's a commonplace that's sort of got attached to and become this. I mean, it's deliberate. It's a deliberate borrowing from that, presumably. On that level, other thoughts? No. Shall we get more evidence? Let us go into Act 1, Scene 2. So we're looking at how the other half lives. Enter Farnese, governor of Malta, knights and officers met by Callimath and bassos of the Turk.
Now, bassos, what demand you at our hands?
No, Knights of Malta, that we came from Rhodes, from Cyprus, Candy, and those other isles that lie betwixt the Mediterranean seas.
What Cyprus, Candy, and those other isles to us, or Malta? What at our hands demand ye?
The 10 years' tribute that remains unpaid.
Alas, my lord, the sum is over great. I hope your highness will consider us.
I wish, grave governor, 'twere in my power to favour you, but 'tis my father's cause, wherein I may not, nay, I dare not dally.
Then give us leave, great sterling Callimath.
Stand all aside, and let the knights determine, and send to keep our galleys under sail, for haply we shall not tarry here. Now, governor, how are you resolved?
Thus, since your hard conditions are such that you will need to have 10 years tribute passed, we may have time to make collection amongst the inhabitants of Malta for it.
That's more than is in our commission.
What, Callapine? A little courtesy. Let's know their time, perhaps 'tis not long. And 'tis more kingly to obtain by peace than to enforce conditions by constraint. What respite ask you, governor?
What, a month?
We grant a month, but see you keep your promise. Now, launch our galleys back again to sea, where we'll attend the respite you have ta'en, and for the money send our messenger. Farewell, great governor, and brave knights of Malta.
And all good fortune waits on Calamath.
And exit Calamath and Bassos, etc.
Go on, and call those Jews of Malta hither. Were they not summoned to appear today?
Officer number 1, please. Oh, you're muted at the moment, Andrew.
That's because I was eating, sorry.
Yeah.
They were, my lord, and here they come.
And enter Barabbas and 3 Jews. Knight number 1, please. Alan.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't got a note of that. Have you determined what to say to them?
Yes, give me leave. And Hebrews, now come near. From the Emperor of Turkey is arrived, great Selim Calamath, his Highness's son, to levy of us 10 years tribute past. Now then, hear know that it concerneth us.
And, good my lord, to keep your quiet still, your lordship shall do well to let them have it.
There's more norms to it than so. To what this 10 years tribute will amount, that we have cast, but cannot compass it, by reason of the walls that robbed our store, and therefore are we to request your aid.
Alas, my lord, we are no soldiers. What's our aid against so great a prince?
Tut, Jew, we know thou art no soldier. Thou art a merchant and a moneyed man. It is thy money, Barabbas, we seek.
How, my lord, my money?
Thine and the rest, for to be short, amongst you it must be had.
Alas, my lord, the most of us are poor.
Then let the rich increase your portions.
Are strangers with your tribute to be taxed?
Have strangers leave with us to get their wealth, then let them with us contribute.
How, equally?
Jew, like infidels, for through our sufferance of your hateful lives, who stand accursed in the sight of heaven, these taxes and afflictions are befalling, and therefore thus we are determined. Read there the articles of our decrees.
And that's first officer to read officers, generally, please.
All right, sorry. My screen just went funny, I apologise.
Yeah, that's right. Happens all the time.
First, the tribute money of the Turk shall all be levied amongst the Jews, and each of them to pay 1/2 of his estate.
Oh, half his estate. I hope you mean not mine.
Read on.
Secondly, he that denies to pay shall straight become a Christian.
Oh, a Christian. What's here to do?
Lastly, he that denies this shall absolutely lose all he has. Oh, my
Oh,
lord.
my lord, we will give
We will give half.
Oh, earth-mettled villains, no Hebrews born, and will you basely thus submit yourselves to leave your goods to their arbitrament?
Why, Barabbas, wilt thou be christened?
No, governor, I will be no convertite.
And pay thy half.
Why, know you what you did by this device? Half of my substance is a city's wealth. Governor, it was not got so easily, nor will I part so slightly therewithal.
Sir, half is the penalty of our decree. Either pay that or we will seize on all.
Corpo di Dio. Stay, you shall have half. Let me be used but as my brethren are.
No, Jew, thou hast denied the articles, and now it cannot be recalled.
And exuent officers on a sign form Fernese.
Will you then steal my goods? Is theft the ground of your religion?
No, Jew, we take particularly thine, to save the ruin of a multitude, and better one want for a common good, than many perish for a private man. Yet, Barabbas, we will not banish thee, but here in Malta, where thou gottest thy wealth, live still, and if thou canst, get more.
Christians, what or how can I multiply? Of naught is nothing made.
From naught at first thou camest to little wealth. From little unto more, from more to most. If your first curse fall heavy on thy head, and make thee poor and scorned of all the world, it is not our fault, but thy inherent sin.
What? Bring you scripture to confirm your wrongs. Preach me not out of my possessions. Some Jews are wicked, as all Christians are. But say the tribe that I descended of were all in general cast away for sin. Shall I be tried by their transgression? The man that dealeth righteously shall live. And which of you can charge me otherwise?
Out, wretched Barabbas, shamest thou not thus to justify thyself, as if we knew that not thy profession? If thou rely upon thy righteousness, be patient, and thy riches will increase. Excess of wealth is cause of covetousness, and covetousness, oh, 'tis a monstrous sin.
Aye, but theft is worse. Tush, take not from me then, for that is theft. And if you rob me thus, I must be forced to steal and compass more.
Grave governor, this not to his exclaims, convert his mansion to a nunnery. His house will harbour many holy nuns.
It shall be so.
And re-enter the officers.
Now, officers, have you done?
Aye, my lord, we have seized upon the goods and wares of Barabbas, which being valid, amount to them all the wealth in Malta, and of the other we have seized half.
Then we'll take order for the residue.
Well then, my lord, say, are you satisfied? You have my goods, my money, and my wealth, my ships, my store, and all that I enjoyed. And having all, you can request no more, unless your unrelenting, flinty hearts suppress all pity in your stony breasts, and now shall move you to bereave my life.
No, Barabbas, to stain our hands with blood is far from us and our profession.
Why, I esteem the injury far less, to take the lives of miserable men than be the causers of their misery. You have my wealth, the labor of my life, the comfort of my age, my children's hope, and therefore ne'er distinguish of the wrong.
Content thee, Barabbas, thou hast naught but right.
Your extreme right does me exceeding wrong, but take it to you in the devil's name.
Come, let us in, and gather of these goods the money for this tribute of the Turk.
'Tis necessary that be looked into, for if we break our day, we break the league, and that will prove but simple policy.
And exit everybody, but we're just going to pause there because this is a very long scene. So the bailiffs are in. We have got a desperate situation for the governor of Malta, which gives him an opportunity to really, really spit out some hatred there. It's so aggressive and so loaded all the way through. And yeah, it's very uncompromising. Thoughts from the room? Who wants to leap in? Who dares at this stage? Oh, I've got my notes here. So much hate flowing in so many different directions. Helen first.
I was struck how very, very quickly they took the no from Barabbas, because it was a fairly, but if I really don't want to do this. Great, you've refused. Now we can take everything.
Mm.
And it seemed there was no moment for him there was no moment of negotiation. The moment he opened his mouth, they seized a negative from it.
Mm. And the sense of this whole thing has been prepared quite carefully. I mean, they knew they were going to have this meeting. They knew they were going to ask the Jewish population or the representatives to turn up, you know, in the earlier scene. So they knew they were going to be asked for money. So, you know, there's a plan in place here that gets executed very, very quickly. It's not spontaneous.
And he is fairly heroic in many ways. I mean, he comes over as fairly heroic.
Yes,
to me, anyway.
Everybody else just immediately goes, take half, and you know, he's going, hang on, maybe not.
Because my half is far more than you need.
Yeah. Alan, then Alexandra.
I was just thinking how things have changed, you know, getting the rich to pay the debts, you know, not the way things are done these days.
Well, we don't know how wealthy the Farnese's entourage are. I mean, there is many historical precedents of this kind of money gouging from a specific group in society. Alexandra, I want to leave you next.
Yeah, just following up on what Helen was saying. I actually liked, in a structural sense, I liked the fact that we meet Barabbas in a position of great power, or presenting himself as though he has enormous power, and then in the very next scene we see him in a circumstance of everybody taking power away from him, and of him being almost powerless. And I thought that was structurally, as I say, that was a really interesting juxtaposition. It's not pleasant to watch, but I feel like that's the point. So if, you know, the amount of invective and hatred and inequality that this scene kind of gives off, if you were to put this on stage and really go for that, we as an audience, I think, would immediately get a very visceral understanding of the environment that we're kind of experiencing, and yeah, probably have more sympathy for our titular character than if we'd only seen his first scene. So if we only see him in power and then we see him abuse the power and then we see what happens as a result, I feel as though we'd get less sympathy than if we see that he's got stakes and suffers.
Yeah, there's an interesting slight question of how he presents power as well in that first scene, because, you know, he's constantly asking, have you heard about my ships? You know, so there is that sense that he's also in a, you know, he's projecting power to his fellows, but he's also got a sense of how unbalanced potentially his situation, how precarious his situation is, especially when we now come to this scene when the state can happily turn up and just go, bam, it's gone. Did I see a hand from Helen a moment ago?
Yes, I was just going to point out that these people are not your normal rulers. These are the Knights of St. John and the governor there. They're not actually, although as a corporation, they have certain resources, they are not individually rich, because they are vowed soldiers.
Right. So Eric, then Lois.
I was just gonna say, it kind of the whole scene with the, you know, oh yeah, if you don't do this, you have to convert and stuff. It just reminded me of Three Ladies of London, where, you know, the Italian merchant brings the Jew, Jew tries to get the Italian merchant to convert, if I'm not mistaken, and then the Italian merchant goes back on his word, whereas here, and there's this whole thing about how, you know, the Jews are more Christian than Christians, which is, I mean, a bit reductive to say, redundant to say now, but here we've got them basically bullying a specific, it's the other end of the stick, I guess.
Yeah, Three Ladies of London, which is about 8 years earlier than this. It's all coming within a very specific time period. The way this is framing, I think, but we can come back to that another time. Lois.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I was going to pick up on what you said about the first scene, because there's that rather odd thing that looks as if it's going to lead somewhere and doesn't, where the messenger says they were surprised that you trusted this, dodgy ship so far, and you think, yes, now in the next minute he's going to hear that it was wrecked. And in fact, what he hears in the next minute is that it's doing splendidly and it's just come into harbor. It's one of these things you think, all this pride is going to get its comeuppance. Oh, no, it doesn't. Then in this next scene, on the other hand, of course, he does get it all taken away from him, but not exactly by some sort of divine act. I mean, it seems to me obvious that any way you play it, that the Christians are behaving incredibly hypocritically. I mean, taking all his money and then telling him that covetousness is a terrible sin, I mean, it's rubbish. And telling him to make more money, as soon as he can, with the view, obviously, that they will then take that too.
Yes, I made a note of that sense a bit like a messenger, in a history play of, that you're expecting that's the direction it's going to go. The merchant comes on and says, your ship hasn't, it is sunk. And it doesn't go that way, though it's possibly setting something up for later. We shall see. Other thoughts? Alexandra, did you wave earlier?
I was just adding to Helen's point about the knights, that the Order of St. Malta is very specifically military and Christian. So their job is to fight the Turks, not make trade with them. And their intensely Christian kind of order situation, I guess, goes some of the way to explain why they are so fiercely anti-Semitic towards our Semitic characters. Which is strange, because why are they not also anti the Turk?
I think given half a chance, we will see. There's a question also of balance of powers. Who has more power than other people? And there's an awful lot of power play going on here. And as those power dynamics shift and change, we'll see what goes on. Just a note that the Barabbas house converted his mansion to a nunnery. So we'll see if that leads anywhere. So any other thoughts before we move on deeper into this scene, because we're still in the same scene? Nope. Lovely. Okay, so everybody's left except for Barabbas and his fellow Jews.
Aye, policy. That's their profession, and not simplicity, as they suggest. The plagues of Egypt and the curse of heaven, earth's barrenness and all men's hatred, inflict upon them, thou great primus motor. And here upon my knees, striking the earth, I ban their souls to everlasting pains and extreme tortures of the fiery deep, that thus have dealt with me in my distress.
Oh, yet be patient, gentle Barabbas.
Oh, silly brethren, born to see this day, why stand you thus unmoved with my laments? Why weep you not to think upon my wrongs? Why pine not I and die in this distress?
Why, Barabbas, as hardly can we brook the cruel handling of ourselves in this. Thou seest they have taken half our goods.
Why did you yield to their extortion? You were a multitude, and I but one, and of me only have they taken all.
Yet, brother Barabbas, remember Job.
Oh, what tell you me of Job? I wot his wealth was written thus. He had 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, and 200 yoke of laboring oxen, and 500 she-asses. But for every one of those, had they been valued at indifferent rate, I had at home and in mine argosy and other ships that came from Egypt last, as much as would have bought his beasts and him, and yet have kept enough to live upon. So that not he, but I may curse the day, thy fatal birthday, forlorn Barabbas, and henceforth wish for an eternal night, that clouds of darkness may enclose my flesh and hide these extreme sorrows from mine eyes. for only I have toiled to inherit here the months of vanity and loss of time, and painful nights have been appointed to me.
Good Barabbas, be patient.
I pray, leave me in my patience. You that were never possessed of wealth are pleased with want, but give him liberty at least to mourn, that in a field amidst his enemies doth see his soldiers slain, himself disarmed, and knows no means of his recovery. Aye, let me sorrow for this sudden chance. 'Tis in the trouble of my spirit I speak. Great injuries are not so soon forgot.
Come, let us leave him. In his ireful mood, our words will but increase his ecstasy.
On then, but trust me, 'tis a misery to see a man in such affliction. Farewell, Barabbas.
Aye, fare you well.
And exit his cohort.
See the simplicity of these base slaves, who for the villains have no wit themselves, think me to be a senseless lump of clay that will with every water wash to dirt. No, Barabbas is born to better chance and framed of finer mold than common men that measure naught but by the present time. A reaching thought will search his deepest wits and cast with cunning for the time to come, for evils are apt to happen every day.
We'll just pause here before we have the entrance of Abigail, his daughter. I think I just have to leap in on Alexandra's comment in the chat of what Barabbas takes from the story of Job.
Yes. Yeah.
Alexandra, would you explain?
Just the conversation, that little snippet of conversations that goes, Barabbas remembered Job. Well, he had so many cows and so many oxen and so many whatevers, camels, sorry, not cows. So yeah, so what I remember from the story about that man who was not swayed in his faith of God by losing all the stuff he had, was all the stuff he had. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Exactly how much stuff he had, and I had more. So I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got so much stuff, so many things. Yeah, that's what he's taking away there. Yeah, it's and again we're working on this sort of progressive numbering system here. So in theory there are three Jews on stage, but one of them basically doesn't speak, another one only says a little bit, and we have a lot of characters in this play where there are X number of knights but only one of them speaks, or two, or etc., and the way that sort of flows through the cast, which means that some people are winners and some people are losers for this play in terms of action. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, when they first arrive, that is the three Jews, Barabbas says, "Why flock you thus to me in multitudes?" And they're not exactly multitudes. I mean, the first time I saw it, I think that was made into a sort of joke, about the fact that there are only three of them, and big deal. And he keeps calling them multitudes. Everybody keeps talking about multitudes. I don't know if the audience was used to assuming that if you see three people, you're just assuming that there are 20 or, hundreds on the stage.
Yes, and it's an interesting thing about talking about bargaining power as well, isn't it? You were a multitude, you could have bargained. I'm just one person, I'm easy to take down. Sort of going, yeah, that really wasn't the situation. They had weapons, you really didn't. Eric.
Well, also because he sees himself as not part of that community, although he then goes, from that point, like he mentions it from that point, and then in this part, he's just like, "Oh, Barabbas is born to better chance and framed a finer thing mold than common men." It's like he's above everybody else in his mind.
Any other thoughts before we go further, Helen?
So far, it seems to me that we've got a star vehicle rather than a company play.
Yep, absolutely. I don't know whether it started out that way, but it certainly was very, 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 very quickly. So, we know it's performed by Lord Strange's men, cast including Edward Allen, who, latches onto this part through the various companies that this play goes through. It goes through quite a few acting companies. So, over a very brief number of years. So yeah, it's not quite a one-man play, but it's not far off it at times. Everything's orbiting him at the moment.
And he doesn't identify as a Jew. He identifies as a man with rights, with a right to be better than everybody else.
He identified himself as the Jew, earlier.
Yes.
It's he is above all that. Andrew.
It looks like he's being the crowning glory, basically, and everyone's flocking around him. And it's like you've got a pinnacle person in the middle, and everybody's around that person, and then every so often jumping in and adding their pennyworth and then coming back out again. So that's what I've sort of gathered through this piece. So which is quite interesting. It's very interesting when you're in the spotlight, you've got somebody shining down the spotlight on Barabbas, and then you get the slight spotlight on the other people, and it goes back to Barabbas again. So yeah.
Alexandra.
There's also interesting to me that this is, if it is, potential, if it's not the first time we have a Jewish character in the lead part and the title part, it's at least a very rare occurrence to have what would be considered as an outsider, or I don't know how to categorize it as a type of character without giving examples from you've got things like Selimus. You've got rare occasions where the main character is someone who would not be considered typical hero, and I find that interesting. And also that this may very well turn out to be a villain protagonist, which again I don't imagine is very common. So it's just something interesting and different. And I don't know whether it was historically an immense kind of leap, or whether we just look at it that way because normal audiences, we don't have much to compare to.
Yeah, there's some in all the plays we've done so far, up to this week, the scale for any Jewish character has been along the line of first Jew in this play. They've been a peripheral character there to serve a plot function, usually a very specific plot function, and he's not in many scenes. We do have an earlier play, which we're doing at the end of the week, Croxton Play of the Sacrament, where there are lots and lots, and also the question of when we get to mystery plays as well, and earlier material like that, and where you categorize and place villain characters and Semitic characters within texts, and that's something we're sort of creeping up sideways to at the moment. So I think in terms of the Playhouse drama that we've been looking at, you're right. I don't think there's been a centralizing of that figure. Eric.
But for example, I can't remember which play, Tireth No Man, maybe? Like Courage basically gets away with whatever he's doing. So like the vices in that play don't really, I mean, there's a few characters that sort of, disappear and get sort of learn a lesson and stuff, but then there's other characters who are sort of not exactly very nice and they just get away with it.
Yes, we looking at Barabbas through the lens of the vice might be a good way of looking at it, because Marlowe was clearly very interested in earlier theatre forms and that sort of material, so that might be a good thing. Let's move forward. We are still in the same scene. It is sort of flowing into itself in interesting ways. So Barabbas is still on stage, still talking, as his daughter Abigail comes in.
But whither wends my beauteous Abigail? Oh, what has made my lovely daughter sad? What, woman, moan not for a little loss. Thy father has enough in store for thee.
Not for myself, but aged Barabbas, father, for thee lamenteth Abigail. But I will learn to leave these fruitless tears, and urge thereto with my afflictions, with fierce exclaims, run to the Senate house, and in the Senate reprehend them all, and rend their hearts with tearing of my hair, till they reduce the wrongs done to my father.
No, Abigail, things past recovery are hardly cured with exclamations. Be silent, daughter. Sufferance breeds ease, and time may yield us an occasion which on the sudden cannot serve the turn. Besides, my girl, think me not all so fond as negligently to forego so much without provision for thyself and me. 10,000 Portuguese, besides great pearls, rich costly jewels, and stones infinite. Fearing the worst of this before it fell, I closely hid.
Where, father?
In my house, my girl.
There shall they ne'er be seen of Barabbas, for they have seized upon the house and wares.
But they will give me leave once more, I trow, to go into my house.
That may they not, for there I left the governor placing nuns, displacing me, and of thy house they mean to make a nunnery, where none but their own sect must enter in, men generally barred.
Oh, my gold, and all my wealth is gone. You partial heavens, have I deserved this plague? What, will you thus oppose me, luckless stars, to make me desperate in my poverty, and knowing me impatient in distress, think me so mad as I will hang myself, that I may vanish o'er the earth in air, and leave no memory that e'er I was? Nah, I will live, nor loathe I this my life. And since you leave me in the ocean thus, to sink or swim, and put me to my shifts, I'll rouse my senses and awake myself. Daughter, I have it. Thou perceiv'st the plight wherein these Christians have oppressed me. Be ruled by me, for in extremity we ought to make bar of no policy.
Father, whate'er it be to injure them that have so manifestly wronged us, what will not Abigail attempt?
Why so? Then thus. Thou toldst me they have turned my house into a nunnery, and some nuns are there.
I did.
Then, Abigail, there must my girl entreat the abbess to be entertained.
How? As a nun?
Aye, daughter, for religion hides many mischiefs from suspicion.
Aye, but father, they will suspect me there.
Let 'em suspect, but be thou so precise as they may think it done of holiness. And treat 'em fair, and give them friendly speech, and seem to them as if thy sins were great, till thou hast gotten to be entertained.
Thus, father, shall I much dissemble?
Hush, as good dissemble that thou never meant'st, than first mean truth, and then dissemble it. A counterfeit profession is better than unseen hypocrisy.
Well, father, say I be entertained, what then shall follow?
This shall follow then. There have I hid, close underneath the plank that runs along the upper chamber floor, the gold and jewels which I kept for thee. And, but here they come. Be cunning, Abigail.
Then, father, go with me.
Oh, Abigail, in this it is not necessary I be seen, for I will seem offended with thee for it. Be close, my girl, for this must fetch my gold.
And they retire out of the way. Interesting question. How long does it take to place a nun? I'm struck by the placing of nuns as a turn of phrase. Again, it's speaking to me of just actually how pre-prepared this is. I mean, how long does it take to take over somebody's house, strip it clear, and then place the nuns in? It speaks to me of forward planning. That this is all intended from the off. I don't know if I'm just reading too much into that. Helen. I'm muted at the moment.
Yes, I agree entirely with you that we're collapsing time here, but it happened also with the officers going out to secure the goods of Barabbas, because they went out, a few people said a few things, they came in and they said, we've got the lot. And this was just not in any way, shape or form credible. I mean, we're talking about a long period of time to gather in that many assets.
Lois.
Yeah, I think Marlowe doesn't actually terribly care about realistic time. I mean, you've read Edward II, haven't you? I mean, the way... Yet. Oh, right. Well, just the way things move there, it's as if they were just sort of stepping over the Irish Sea and then stepping over it again to get back and so on. I mean, it really, there's nothing realistic about the handling of time.
And then it's interesting the level, Abigail's, it's not fair. The vengeance will be mine. I mean, she's the way she appears is interesting. Eric, I saw a hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say that maybe he's kind of invented the Stanislavski method before Stanislavski, because he goes, as good dissemble that thou never meanest, as first mean truth and then dissemble it, which is basically like, method acting.
Yes, that's one to throw out. Undercover nun time. Undercover Nun. I think that's a spin-off, isn't it? Abigail, Undercover Nun. Make an excellent 80s television series, I would have thought. Nobody's running with that one. Probably wise. Okay.
Set it in Sydney and have them in a scrum.
Oh
dear, Sheila.
I'm sorry. It wasn't worth saying it out loud, so I put it in the chat.
Yeah, but it should be said out loud, and I think you should say it out loud.
Okay, so we're entering the undercover section of the play.
Oh gosh.
Yep.
Someone was talking about a whoopee cushion earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Pull it back. We'll pull it back. So. Yeah, it's it's interesting. Abigail's not keen on the whole lying thing. Doesn't want to lie too much. And he's just going, no, it's fine. But finding the gold from under the floors. Making sure that assets are removable, but also hidden. So yes, other thoughts on anything else from the scene so far? Because we still haven't finished the scene. Scene is still going on.
Right. Actually, I was really interested. I know this isn't at all considered a revenge tragedy, but especially thus far, the kind of relationship to time, the kind of very convoluted plots, and the ways in which we talked about kind of in the beginning. The way Barabbas is almost kind of framed as this heroic figure in the beginning does strike me as containing some key revenge tragedy elements.
Yeah, I like that. Eric?
I was going to say, there's a bit where Abigail mentions the Senate, and I'm like, but isn't the Senate a Roman thing? Not a sort of later 1500 or whenever this thing is set thing. Because it's unless she means I'm going to go and sort of beg for mercy wherever the seat of power is.
Yeah, I think it's probably just working as a term for the seat of power. I mean, I genuinely don't know whether it is continued and was in use in that way. Wise ahead of the room may know. Or if it's just a generic signifier.
Definitely not in Malta.
Okay, we will move forward. The Abigail and Barabbas have moved out of sight, as it were. They retire, and we have the entrance of Friar Giacomo, Friar Barnardine, Abbess, and a nun. I missed a nun. I'm assuming the nun doesn't say anything.
Sisters, we are now almost at the new made nunnery.
The better, for we love not to be seen. 'Tis 30 winters long since some of us did stray so far amongst the multitude.
But madam, this house and waters of this new made nunnery will much delight you.
It may be so. But who comes here?
Abigail comes forward.
Grave Abbess, and you happy virgin's guide, pity the state of a distressed maid.
What art thou, daughter?
The hopeless daughter of a hapless Jew, the Jew of Malta, wretched Barabbas, sometimes the owner of a goodly house, which they have now turned to a nunnery.
Well, daughter, say, what is thy suit with us?
Fearing the afflictions which my father feels proceed from sin or want of faith in us, I'd pass away my life in penitence and be a novice in your nunnery to make atonement for my labouring soul.
No doubt, brother. This proceedeth of the spirit.
Aye, and of a moving spirit too, brother. But come, let us entreat she may be entertained.
Well, daughter, we admit you for a nun.
Ah, first, let me as a novice learn to frame my solitary life to your straight laws, and let me lodge where I was wont to lie. I do not doubt by your divine precepts and mine own industry, but to profit much.
Much, I hope, is all I hid is worth.
Come, daughter, follow us.
Why, how now, Abigail? What makest thou amongst these hateful Christians?
Hinder now her not, thou man of little faith, for she has mortified herself,
How mortified?
and is admitted to the sisterhood.
Child of perdition and thy father's shame, what wilt thou do among these hateful fiends? I charge thee on my blessing that thou leave these devils and their damned heresy.
Father, forgive me.
Stay back, Abigail, and think upon the jewels and the gold. The boar it is marked thus that covers it. Away, accursed, from my father's sight.
Barabbas, although thou art in disbelief, and wilt not see thine own afflictions, yet thy daughter to be no longer blind.
Blind friar, I reck not thy persuasions. The board is marked thus that covers it, for I had rather die than see her thus. Wilt thou forsake me too in my distress, seduced daughter? Go, forget not. Becomes it Jews to be so credulous? Tomorrow early I'll be at the door. Forget me, see me not, and so be gone. Farewell, remember tomorrow morning. Out, out, thou wretch!
And exit on one side Barabbas, exuent on the other side, friars, abbess, nun, and Abigail. And as they are going out, enter Matthias.
Who's this? Fair Abigail, the rich Jew's daughter, become a nun? Her father's sudden fall has humbled her and brought her down to this. Touch, she were fitter for a tale of love than to be tired out with orisons. And better she would far become a bed, embraced in a friendly lover's arms, than rise at midnight to a solemn mass.
And enter Lodowick.
Why, how now, Burn Matthias? In a dump?
Believe me, noble Lodowick, I have seen the strangest sight, in my opinion, that I ever beheld.
What was it, I prithee?
A fair young maid, scarce 14 years of age, the sweetest flower in Cytherea's field, cropped from the pleasures of the fruitful earth, and strangely metamorphosed to nun.
Say, what was she?
Why, the rich Jew's daughter.
What, Barabbas? Whose goods were lately seized? Is she so fair?
And matchless beautiful, as had you seen her, 'twould have moved your heart through countermind with walls of brass to love, or at least to pity.
And if she be so fair as you report, 'twere time well spent to go and visit her. How say you? Shall we?
I must and will, sir. There is no remedy.
And so will I too, though it shall go hard. Farewell, guys.
Farewell, Lodowick.
And they exit severally. So I always love it when you have early modern people being in the dump. I just think it's such a lovely, lovely phrase. It's leapt through time and still functions perfectly well. Well done, Barabbas, for negotiating the asides and not asides, some of which were mislabeled. So well done there. That has been noted. So yes, it's they're obviously short of novices because there wasn't much of an application process, was there? You know, there wasn't even a form to fill in. Yeah, he's not hanging around, is he, with plot? And you know, it's functioning quite nicely as this you know, opportunity for, you know, the asides and the back and forth and the semi-comic business of it all seems to flow very nicely. And then we get this sort of love plot. Sort of suddenly out of nowhere, we meet these two people we've never met before. Who just comes in, oh, she's a lovely nun. Yeah. Thoughts from the room? The scene has finally ended. Not only is the scene ended, the act has ended. You can all breathe a sigh of relief. We've got to the end of that act. Lois.
Yeah, well, one thing that's already been set up, I think, is the joke about lecherous friars. I mean, Giacomo and Lodovic both make comments that have double meanings, I think, about proceeding from the spirit. And they've obviously got their little lecherous eyes on Abigail already. This is just the typical treatment of friars in Protestant drama.
And to be fair, in Catholic drama as well, everybody has a go at friars. They're easy meat.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, Alan?
Yeah, interesting contrast with the piece we were reading the other day, because I was half expecting the two swains that we've just seen to actually be doing their damnedest to run in the opposite direction if Daddy's lost all his money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's well. I mean, we don't. You know, it's at the moment it's very much just a sight thing, isn't it? But yeah, it's a good point. Helen.
Yeah, I don't. From what following Alan, she didn't seem to be talking necessarily about marriage. To a time well spent to go and visit her, rather than I must have her for my wife.
I think you have a purer view of their motives than maybe I do.
No.
The other way around.
It's the other way round. I mean, you're saying he isn't. Oh, I see. You thought they can't be after money, and I say no. I don't think they necessarily are after money, but they're certainly not after chaste conversation.
Other thoughts, Eric?
I just wanted to apologize because I misread "none" as "man" originally, which was much more interesting.
It would have changed the plot quite considerably.
Yes.
Also, suddenly there's a regeneration scene in the middle of this. It's where do we go from here?
There's I was wondering why they name check each other at the end of the scene. It's like farewell Matthias and farewell Lodowick. Is this customary?
We've only just met them.
Yeah.
Just who are you again? Oh, I'm Lodowick. Yeah. Yeah, so that way you get their names at least twice in a scene, in a very short period of time, just to make sure the audience remember who they are. Third time's the charm. Right. So yeah, we've got. I mean, that was just a massive scene, and it wasn't. There was no breaking of time. These scenes are all flowing into each other, and that playing around with time and just telescoping the action very, very efficiently. So we've gone from the beginning of the scene where we have a meeting of Farnese and the Turks. Setting up the problem of money through the extortion of money, through the revenge. How do we get the money out of the house from the secret compartment where we keep the gold? To at the end of it, this sort of proto-love interest has been thrown in. Huge amounts has happened in a very short temporal amount of space. Even if it's as a unit of action, it's quite long. It's good 400 lines. Any additional thoughts? Liking Abigail so far, Alexandra.
Yeah, liking Abigail so far. The little that she says, nevertheless, gives enough characterization to her that she doesn't feel flat on her first appearance, and indeed in just overall in this kind of interaction where she's part of her father's plot. It's definitely his plot, but she's a willing participant making contributions. So or at least it feels that way. I mean, she doesn't contribute to any of the plan. It's not revolutionary as a piece of writing, but it's quite nice.
Yeah, she's come in saying, "How do we redress these wrongs that have been done to us?" And when it says, she's coming in weeping or whatever. I don't think it's, you know, soft. You know, it's there's a rage in there.
Yeah, and I mean, she the first thing she does is she threatens to walk into the Senate and shout at them. You know, and the willingness with which she partakes in the plans, and as I say, you know, she doesn't contribute to the plotting, but she's perfectly happy to be an active participant, rather than just, you know, generally the subject of the love story in this of the love plot that other people do things and she just is.
Lois.
Yeah, and it's inherently a funny scene. I mean, two people improvising a play of a grieved father and a miserable daughter, a rebellious daughter. You know, they're playing up to each other probably. I think you'd pretty much have to do it that way. I mean, you couldn't really play Abigail as someone who didn't want to do any of this and was therefore doing it badly, because that would sort of wreck the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a really important question we haven't really addressed yet, which is tone in this play. You know, how much of this is played for laughs? How much of this is just allowed if there is laughs to come? You know, you know, Barabbas's line, "How mortified!" You know, that may just because of the sort of the modern way that lands, but it just the potential for comedy in that, just those two words, is huge. Yeah. You know, it's there's all sorts that can go on there. Yeah, so that's a big question that you know, the production needs to ask is, you know, what is your Barabbas doing? How much of a clown type performance is this? Because it could be. And where do you pitch the rest of the performances around that as well? You know, we talk about it being perhaps a star vehicle, but, you know, the rest of the ensemble have to match his performance. The worst thing you can have is when nobody else matches, you know, the lead. A la many Stephen Burkoff performances. Eric.
I just had a realization, because, you know, they always come later. But it's interesting that Matthias doesn't go to ask Barabbas about this. He just decides to go straight to Abigail.
Yeah. Wait for the next act.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. Talking of the next act, we have two short scenes to look at today in Act 2. So let's look at Act 2, Scene 1. And lo and behold, having had all of maybe 2 minutes off stage, had a quick, I don't know, sucked on an orange and, you know, and then come straight back on again. Enter Barabbas with a light.
Thus, like the sad presaging raven that tolls the sick man's passport in her hollow beak, and in the shadow of the silent night doth shake contagion from her sable wings. Vexed and tormented runs poor Barabbas with fatal curses towards these Christians. The uncertain pleasures of swift-footed time have ta'en their flight and left me in despair, and of my former riches rests no more but bare remembrance, like a soldier's scar that has no further comfort for his maim. O thou, that with a fiery pillar ledst the sons of Israel through the dismal shades, light Abraham's offspring, and direct the hand of Abigail this night, or let the day turn to eternal darkness after this. No sleep can fasten on my watchful eyes, nor quiet enter my distempered thoughts, till I have answer of my Abigail.
And enter Abigail above.
Now have I happily espied a time to search the plank my father did appoint, and here, behold, unseen, where I have found the gold, the pearls, and jewels which he hid.
Now I remember those old women's words, who in my wealth would tell me winter's tales, and speak of spirits and ghosts that glide by night about the place where treasure hath been hid. And now methinks that I am one of those. For whilst I live, here lives my soul's sole hope. And when I die, here shall my spirit walk.
Now that my father's fortune was so good as but to be about this happy place, it is not so happy. Yet when we parted last, he said he would attend me in the morn. Then gentle sleep, where'er his body rests, give charge to Morpheus that he may dream a golden dream, and of the sudden wake, come and receive the treasure I have found.
Bueno para todos me ganado no era. As good go on as sit so sadly thus. But stay, what star shines yonder in the east? The lodestar of my life, if Abbot. There,
Who's that?
peace Abigail, 'tis I.
Then, Father, here receive thy happiness.
Hast thou it?
Here, hast thou it? There's more, and more, and more.
Oh, my girl, my gold, my fortune, my felicity, strength to my soul, death to mine enemy. Welcome, the first beginner of my bliss. Oh, Abigail, Abigail, that I had thee here too. Then my desires were fully satisfied, but I will practice thy enlargement thence. Oh, girl, oh, gold, oh, beauty, oh, my bliss.
Hugs the bags.
Father, it draweth towards midnight now, and about this time the nuns begin to wake. To shun suspicion, therefore, let us part.
Farewell, my joy, and by my fingers take a kiss from him that sends it from his soul.
And exit Abigail above.
Now, Phoebus, ope the eyelids of the day, and for the raven wake the morning lark, that I may hover with her in the air, singing o'er these as she does o'er her young.
And exit end of scene. It's reminding me, and it brings up interesting questions actually about plays we've done previously. It's reminding me very much of Avarice in Res Publica, who has constant ongoing business with bags of money. We've had a few other instances of people, people being literally inflated by money in other senses. So I'm just wondering about whether there is in parts in earlier vice traditions where perhaps there's much more of a connection with perhaps a perceived anti-Semitic bent to the way those things should be performed, or would have been performed at the time or not, of which isn't really what this forum is for, but it's just making a note for future reference. Thoughts about this scene? Sheila.
Yeah, going back to the bags of money being thrown around stage, I was reminded the York Remorse of Judas, I think, has that scene where they are throwing the bag of money as a kind of hot potato between Judas and Pilate and a couple of other people. But speaking
Annas and
of
Caiaphas?
kind of, sorry?
Annas and Caiaphas?
Yes, yes. But I was instantly reminded of bags of money as very active props in that sense.
Yes, yes, absolutely on that. Yeah, the way they function, you know, and it is pure joy from everyone, isn't it? Isn't it lovely having money? It's terrible not having money. So you know, let's go with that. Barabbas entering with a light, so you know, to signify that it is dark, that it is night at the time. Other thoughts? Abigail, you enjoyed getting the money out, I can tell. But Helen has just put her hand up, and you have pins and things. Helen.
Following on from your collapsed time theory, I kept on thinking through this scene that it would have been so much more sensible if Abigail had taken time to case the joint, to work out how, when the nuns got up and when they went to bed, to say, right, do it the first night, just go in there, get it, throw it out of the window, arrange this without any planning at all. So it's another example of what you were saying.
I mean, she does at least have the advantage of home territory. She knows where everything is. So, and if the nuns have only just moved in, maybe they're all, you know, they haven't spread out yet. Maybe it's safer to do it now before they actually occupy much of the building. I don't know why we're thinking about this too. The logistics of incoming.
It's because we really want the Undercover series.
Yes.
It's a thing that really needs to happen. Yeah. I agree with you, Helen, that it would have been interesting, but also it's possible that again, because it's collapsed time, this is not actually, we're supposed to understand this is not the first night, and things have, there's been quite a deal of time that she's had to spend there, and so that when some things happen, probably tomorrow, it's not as sudden as it seems to us regarding Abigail and the nuns, I mean.
Yeah.
Potentially, I don't know.
Other thoughts, Lois?
I don't know. I think things are just meant to rush on. I mean, it's that kind of play. Things just keep happening one after the other, and one thing leads to another in the most amazing way. I always find this scene very puzzling. I mean, those lines about the uncertain pleasures of swift-footed time obtained their flight and left me in despair. That sounds like Dr. Faustus at the end of 24 years. It doesn't really sound like Barabbas. I mean, he seems to be going through several different roles here. I mean, it's partly because he is generally putting on an act, I think, for almost everybody, but it's hard to see why he should be in despair at the moment, since he's actually expecting Abigail to turn up with the money, or at least he's hoping that she will.
Yeah, maybe it's just that uncertainty is, at the moment he has nothing. If she fails, then they're seriously screwed. Alexandra.
Sorry, unless that is the representation of time passing. Because we've had him on his own talking, we've had Abigail on her own talking, wishing him to sleep well, then we have him waking up, then we have him going to the place, then we have them meeting up. So potentially this is a montage. Yeah, and that would explain the thing that's strange to us in terms of collapsed time, is that actually it's concertinaed, so we would still see it. Or possibly that's just a suggestion for how to do it on stage.
Alan?
Confused me slightly as we seem to be getting Marlowe playing around with chucking in tags from any language he can actually find, with no apparent justification, therefore, other than possibly to show off he's a Cambridge-educated smart-ass.
Lois?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of them do it in this period. I mean, I don't know if you've done the Spanish tragedy, but that also throws in tags in, I think, both Spanish and Italian and bits of Latin, in fact, quite a lot of Latin. Yeah, I'm not sure what the idea of that is, whether it was just a pleasure for people to hear it, especially those that actually did know the language.
Yep, no idea. It's an excellent question. I think in Spanish tragedy terms, it's the play plays around with language as more of a thematic thing, whereas this just seems to be a strange Bar Abbas quirk.
Just think it could be about the sort of international background. I mean, that first speech of his is just full of references to everywhere, really, in the known world, and this could also be to suggest that, he's been everywhere. He is the wandering Jew, in fact, and he's picked up a bit of everything.
Well, if you are a trader, it does make sense to have a smattering of languages so you can actually bargain directly. I mean, if this is basically a massive port, a trading hub, then that might be necessary. So that might be part of his thing. Helen?
And he's hardly native of Malta. I mean, he or his family will have come from somewhere else, quite possibly Spain, but equally possibly Italy. But because there is the population of Malta was A, very small, and B, not really allowed to say in anything, trading or otherwise.
And yeah, briefly, just talking about his identity again. Abigail in the previous scene, of course, once again to a demonstrative audience, again, the Jew of Malta. It's him. That and you did that very nicely. It's just it does seem to be a moniker he's taken on himself, isn't it? That's his. That's how he's known. He's the big cheese. Eric.
You kind of imagine him going, the one, the only, the Jew of Malta. And it's like kind of like a bit weird in the context of what's happening to him. But yeah.
It's marketing, isn't it? It's marketing.
Capo di capo.
Okay, we have one short scene left to go. We're going to meet. We're going back to Farnese, Martin del Bosco, Knights and Officers in Act 2, Scene 2.
Now, Captain, tell us whither thou art bound. Whence is thy ship that anchors in our road, and why thou camest to shore without our leave?
Governor of Malta, hither am I bound. My ship, the Flying Dragon, is of Spain, and so am I. Del Bosco is my name, Vice Admiral unto the Catholic King.
'Tis true, my lord. Therefore, entreat him well.
Our fraught is Grecians, Turks, and Afric Moors, for late upon the coast of Corsica, because we vailed not to the Turkish fleet, their creeping galleys had us in the chase. But suddenly the wind began to rise, and then we luffed and tacked and fought at ease. Some have we fired, and many have we sunk. But one amongst the rest became our prize. The captain's slain, the rest remain our slaves, of whom we would make sail in Malta here.
Martin del Bosco, I have heard of thee. Welcome to Malta and to all of us. But to admit a sail of these thy Turks, we may not, nay, we dare not give consent, by reason of a tributary league.
Del Bosco, as thou lovest and honourest us, persuade our governor against the Turk. This truce we have is but in hope of gold, and with that sum he craves might we wage war.
Will knights of Malta be in league with Turks, and buy it basely for sums of gold? My lord, remember that to Europe's shame, the Christian Isle of Rhodes, from whence you came, was lately lost, and you were stated here to be at deadly enmity with Turks.
Captain, we know it, but our force is small.
What is the sum that Calymath requires?
100,000 crowns.
My lord and king hath title to this isle, and he means quickly to expel you hence. Therefore be ruled by me, and keep the gold. I'll write unto his majesty for aid, and not depart until I set you free.
On this condition shall thy Turks be sold. Go, officers, and set them straight in show.
Excellent officers.
Bosco, thou shalt be Malta's general. We and our warlike knights will follow thee against these barbarous misbelieving Turks.
So shall you imitate those you succeed. For when their hideous force environed Rhodes, small though the number was that kept the town, they fought it out, and not a man survived to bring the hapless news to Christendom.
So will we fight it out. Come, let's away. Proud daring Calymath, instead of gold, will send thee bullets wrapped in smoke and fire. Claim tribute where thou wilt, we are resolved. Honour is bought with blood, and not with gold.
And they exit, and the political situation has moved somewhat. Let's keep the money. Let's keep the money. Let's open the box. And yes, we have the introduction of slave trade. This will be lead to a plot thread that we'll pick up tomorrow. That's quite an important element. But yeah, it's that thing of well, we'd give you consent to sell them here, but we've got this whole thing with the Turks and his money, and it's complicated. It's like, yeah. Just there's some other stuff and plot and things was what I took from quite a lot of that scene. Just got the vague gist of it, but you know, there's an awful lot of exposition flying around there. Thoughts on that scene before we go into final thoughts from everyone? Lois first.
Again, it's just something I remember from a performance. After Bosco has persuaded them all to make war on the Turks, he then encourages them by telling what happened to the people on this other island, who were, of course, completely slaughtered. And you can sort of imagine the looks of the Maltese as they hear this wonderful example they're supposed to be following. And then Farnese having to say, oh, so will we fight it out?
Great plan. Great plan.
Yeah.
Alexandra.
That's a reference to what would have been very recent historical events in the world of the play and in I guess even within the performative times, it would have still been in the last 50 to 100, well, yeah, years, which is that's Rhodes is where the Knights of Malta were expelled from. Before they were the Knights of Malta, they were of Rhodes, and they failed to keep Rhodes, at which point I think for a few years they were wandering, and then the King of Aragon went, hey, I've got a little rock in the sea somewhere random. You can have it if you make sure to keep the Turks at bay, keep them away from Spain, and you can have that bit. So yeah, it's nice that that's included here as presumably something that, you know, the educated portion of the audience would have known or recognized as, oh yes, a reference to recent historical events, and possibly everybody would have had some idea of everybody in the audience, I mean. But yeah, for us nowadays, I don't know how we'd snippets like that, or the references that to other parts of the world and events in the rest of the world that are made at the very beginning of this play. I don't know how we'd in a modern performance how you'd have that effect.
Yeah, we've had a few plays or done a few plays now where relatively recent historical references do not land. You know, clearly are a problem. I think at least in this scene, it's such a minor element to it in terms of you know, we can get away with it. It's not like it's a whole play like the Battle of Alcazar, where you know everyone was just going, don't know what this is. Helen.
I do remember it's the same production that Lois saw, Alan Armstrong. There was quite a lot of interaction with the audience, and at one point somebody laughed at some extremely obscure reference like this, and he turned and looked at them and said, well, someone's read their program notes. which got the best laugh of the evening, I may say, and I imagine he was chastised for it afterwards by whoever was running the show. But it certainly is a considerable problem. I think we ought not to say the elite will know the history and the rest won't, because you've got to remember modern history was not taught in schools, but it was generally known about through massive quantities of ballads and also plays and woodcuts and prayers. They actually had prayers. During the Siege of Malta, there were prayers said in every English parish church about the Siege of Malta by royal decree. So someone stood up and said why we were praying for the Christians on Malta, and then they prayed for the Christians on Malta. So news was circulating about this sort of thing fairly madly.
And it's similarly with elements of you know, classical myths and learning. You know, is percolating in popular culture around at the same time. So it's not always a case that these things which today look elitist are in fact, you know, the person on the street might know it from a song. You know, and so yeah, there is that interesting flip that we have a bit today. Actually, is that popular culture then is increasingly a very elitist thing now, and how do we deal with that? As you know, it's slowly. Eric, one play at a time.
Also, you kind of, well, I mean, like, you know, the historical context is notwithstanding, like, you kind of get the impression that Martin del Bosco might actually be a little bit of not a coward exactly, but like he talks about, you know, how the people on Rhodes fought it out and then no one survived, but we still know the story. So it's like, was he there? Did he run? Like, what happened?
I also I think we should do a shout out here to his ship. The Flying Dragon is a fabulous ship name, and yeah, that's one for appropriation. I think that's a fabulous name. Though, of course, problematic because it's a slave ship. So that's a bit awkward. Lois.
Yeah, just well, a couple of things. I mean, one is maybe irrelevant, but if anybody lives in London, you can go to see the museum of the Knights of Malta. I mean, they became the St. John's Ambulance Brigade eventually, and there's a museum in St. John's Gate, a beautiful building that's gone through all sorts of changes and been used for all sorts of things. I mean, at one time, it was actually where the Master of the Revels was, and people actually brought their plays there to be vetted. But at the moment, it has this museum, and it does actually have exhibitions about the Siege of Malta and the Siege of Rhodes and the later history of that company. That's just one thing, in case it's useful to anyone. The other thing is just picking up on what Helen said about Alan Armstrong. I'm sure he didn't get into trouble for the ad lib because he did something or other, I think, just about every night. I mean, at one point, when somebody got one of his obscure allusions, he sort of looked at them and said, "Don't go," as if we want to keep the you treasured people here. There was quite a lot of playing off the audience, and again, it fits with what you've probably gathered is my view of this play, which is that it is to a large extent extremely funny. I mean, that an awful lot of the plot devices used in it are comic; they're not tragic. I mean, the whole business of going from what you say to somebody to asides, and then back to what you say to them, and then to asides, and playing up to each other. And I mean, so much of this is it's comic business.
Yes. So at the moment you said St. John's Ambulance, I just have a vision of an army all armed with wet sponges. The most terrifying thing that can ever happen. Sorry. Entirely random reference I'll move away from. Okay, we're into extra time, so we're going to go round and do a roundup of the final thoughts so far. So I'll start with Eric today. Any final thoughts about the first, almost third?
It's very quick. Although we had that huge scene before in Act 1, it still sort of flowed very easily. I mean, even though this is, obviously we're stopping to analyze it, it still flows quite quickly, and there's a lot of action to take in, even for a modern audience. I don't know, sort of, because people appear and then never appear again, probably till I don't know, another next act or next few scenes. And yeah, I don't know, it's interesting how you introduce a new character in Act 2, which is quite interesting, considering usually most things have you've already introduced all the basics in Act 1. So I don't know, that's an interesting element to think about.
I think, yeah, there's a structural thing about plays is there's only so many characters you can introduce straight away. So the very end of Act 1, we're being introduced to those Lodovic and Matthias. We've a peripheral character has been added here, and we're going to meet someone tomorrow. It's not really a spoiler, who's quite important. So there's still time into Act 2 to be layering in more characters without overloading the audience by going, too many people on stage. Though at the moment, the only character we've really met is Barabbas, really. Elizabeth, final thoughts? Elizabeth, any final thoughts? Have you frozen?
Yes. Hopefully I haven't frozen. Hopefully I'm still moving.
You are moving, yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I really like this play. I've heard a lot about it, and I've read a lot about it, but I've never actually read the play itself. So I'm enjoying the reading of the play quite a lot. The narrative is, as Eric said, is quite a smooth ride. In a lot of the Turkish plays that we've read, there's a lot of murders and violent acts on stage, and there haven't been any in this one, which I like a lot because it means that we can focus on the characters. At the moment, my favourite character is Abigail. I think that she's a really strong woman, and I think that her relationship with her father, Barabbas, is a good twist on the narrative. It's a good addition to the narrative and to the characters. We're kind of left wondering with Barabbas what he's going to do next and what his course of action is going to be, which I like a lot.
Excellent. I'm just going to say to the room, no spoilers for those who knows where we're going. I think I'll throw that in. There's some really excellent things there. Alan, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's moving at a good pace. I mean, I think probably we would have been what under the hour at this point. Had we not been stopping and talking. So it's actually moving quite fast. It's I'm getting a feeling. I think you said that this is from a 1630s print. So by which point it had had many years to have all the corners rubbed off, and it will be interesting to see how far if anyone had got access to what the original script looked like before it got worn down through performance.
Well, I genuinely don't know whether there's any meaningful evidence as to what it might have looked like before. It may be exactly as it was originally. There may be no changes. But
possibly a question for Dan if he comes on later in the week.
Indeed. Lois, final thoughts?
Yes, I was thinking about that, the textual transmission as well. There is a big argument about whether Heywood, who introduces this play and gave it to the publisher and wrote a new prologue and epilogue for it, also in fact wrote some of it. And there is a bit of this play which also turns up in another of his plays. So the question is, what is the relationship, and is he just plagiarizing from Marlowe, or are both scenes by him? It's anybody's guess. I mean, the play in some ways is like other Marlowe plays, and then in some ways it's not really. I mean, it's got such a strongly comic element in it. But then, of course, there are comic scenes in Faustus, and there is a kind of nasty humor in Tamburlaine, and even Edward II as well. This humor isn't always nasty. I mean, some of it is just purely comic, I think. It's resulting from situation and the sort of tricks that Bergson, for example, talks about in the book on laughter, mechanical devices almost that happen to seem funny precisely because they're sort of automatic.
Alexandra, final thoughts?
I mean, I like it because I have a soft spot for Marlowe. But also I think there's maybe because this is the version we're particularly reading now has been through a bit of polishing. It doesn't feel to me as though the secondary, tertiary characters are written flatly or kind of are constructed just as line feeders. It does feel as though there's stuff to play with in the parts that are not the main part, and we have a main part who does not spend 4 hours speaking, 4 pages speaking with lots of other people on stage just kind of being ornamental, although he is the driver behind all the action in this section. I wonder a lot about how this could be put on nowadays and what could be done with, to, for it, and a variety of other prepositions, because there are some problematic elements, and there will be more in the days hereafter, but there are also some really interesting sort of worth exploring elements to it. So yeah, that's my mission for the week. I won't be around for the other readings, but I'll be listening to them. So yeah, figuring out how even to approach this.
I think it's been proposed by one of our number who's been looking at other plays dealing with Jewish characters and history, specifically biblical plays. It's the thing of how would we deal with this? Well, very carefully, but also I think curated within context of other work. It's not a play where I go, let's just put this on for a crack. I think that's a really just not the way to go. So yeah, I think it's a big question of which we do not have to come up with an absolute answer, but certainly it's we're always looking at what we do in terms of performance and how do we approach a text like this. So it's very much uppermost in my mind. Sheila, as welcome. This is your first time. Welcome to Final Thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the world?
So I've been really interested so far, again, as somebody who I have vague memories of the plot of this play, and I've listened to many conversations about it, but haven't reread it in a while. But it's been really interesting to see how this play floats in the beginning, these plots that are signaled to the audience to be important or fraught with the possibility of failure, like how Barabbas's ship right in the beginning is kind of flagged, and your expectation is, oh, this ship is going to fail, or this nun plot with Abigail and the expectation that like, oh, this is going to go terribly. So I'm interested to see in later acts when chaos does descend on this play.
Indeed. Andrew, also new to the group, welcome. 2 final thoughts. Do you have anything to close with?
I think it's a very historical piece, and it's got a lot of religious through lines throughout the piece, which is quite interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see how the characters develop as the piece goes on, and as Sheila said, the chaos that's going to come through the journey of the piece. But it's really interesting, and it's great looking at pieces like this. I haven't done a lot of these types of pieces for a long time, so it's good to do this type of work, and just to enjoy the words as well, because the way the words and the intonation are delivered is really interesting. So yeah.
What I really like. I mean, I say this. I very rarely do any readings in these sessions. Is yes, getting your tongue into shape with these texts is really wonderful. And you know, this one is very nice because it is really well polished. Sometimes as an actor, it's the most technically challenging thing is when you have one that is less polished, and then making that function and making that work. So you know, the challenges. With these texts, it's different every time. It's different every time, he said. Helen, your last, I think, final thoughts.
Yes, I think the one thing that surprised me is how much I'm admiring Barabbas. He seems to be so far, on the whole, behaving in a remarkably commendable fashion. I'm sure that's going to change, but nevertheless, I'm surprised by this. I thought certainly from the setup in the prologue that we were going to find somebody who was utterly despicable or frightful, but he really isn't. Okay, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily want him as your life partner except for the money, but nevertheless, you know, I'm surprised by that. I'd completely forgotten the play, it turns out.
Which, to be fair, is how we tend to end up a few months after we've read them here.
Months, days.
Yeah. Yes, someone said, you know, the play we were looking at the other week, and I was going, what did we look at last week? God only knows. Yes, that's the first. I mean, it's not quite third. We've done less text today because the next scene is very long again, so we're slightly unbalanced. So we're looking at slightly more text over the next 2 sessions than we have for this first one. But I thought it was better to ease us into it and then let the momentum build, rather than the other way around, as I sometimes do for other plays. We are going to continue the journey next time, but all that remains now is to thank all the readers today and say goodbye.
Bye.